Good afternoon, everyone. Shane McPhail here with RSI. Today we are going to be presenting the release features that are coming out tomorrow in version 8.20. We should have it out around midday Pacific time or a little bit after that. So today is to give you an introduction to the features that we're putting in. We'll also be putting out the full release notes tomorrow with the release that you can access right from Roomkey when you're downloading. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the changes that we made to the groups area and in relation to the group cutoff dates. Now this is something we actually announced in our last we put in the release notes in our last release. We put it in the teaser email. We just want to make sure that everyone was prepared for the changes that are coming. So the first thing we'll know is on the left-hand side, Shane QA testing. This is the current version of Roomkey. And what you're going to see is I have the John View group arriving on February 3rd. I have 4 days before, and my cutoff days are set as 0. You'll notice that the cutoff date for John View is actually January 30th. So what's happening here is Roomkey is not doing the cutoff based on the arrival date of the group. Roomkey is doing the cutoff based on the block date, so it's including those pre-nights. So the change that we made, and many would say this would be a fix that we put in, is really when we think of cutoff days, we should be thinking of cutoff days in relation to the arrival date of the group. So what you'll see here is we have the same type of group set up. The only thing is this has 3 days, but we can ignore the number of nights. Mainly has to do with the arrival date. So see how the arrival date is the same, and then the number of nights before is the same. But here we have the 0 cutoff days. Indeed, we can see that the cutoff date is going to be on February 3rd, the date of arrival. So that's the first change that we made for the cutoff date. We're respecting the arrival date instead of the blocking date. The second change we made, and again, this was more of a fix. This is something that should have been in place, but we had not addressed it. And because we are making the change, but perhaps because everyone was used to the way it worked, we want to be sure that we pointed this out to everyone. So here I have this group called JT. Okay, hi everyone. My VoIP phone unfortunately cut out there for a moment. Perfect. It looks like everyone started to tell me around 2:36 that my phone cut out here, so I do apologize for that. If indeed it happens again, just let me know. I may switch over to my mic and speakers instead of the VoIP phone, but we'll go forward for now. So I'm just going to back up a little bit. So the fix that we did here is, if you had a group that was arriving on January 19th, now today being February 2nd, and here we have the cutoff day set at 0, and it's set as cutoff type whole block. What that would mean is on January 19th at the end of day, room key technically should release the whole block for all days of the group. What was happening right now in current room key is when this is set at 0, room key was not actually releasing any block. So we found that the use case for this is sometimes hotels will put in like JTB block for the whole summer, where they may hold for 5 months, 20 rooms per day, just for the block, the contracted block for the whole season. And then as they get the individual rooming lists or the individual group numbers for the individual groups, they would create a new group and take the block out of this main hold and put it into the individual group. So the rule here would be that we are going to start respecting that if you have the cutoff days at 0, we're not just going to ignore cutoff day. We would take that as your cutoff day would be January 19th. So in the instance I said, if you did want to hold a group block for 5 months, even past its arrival date, you would actually switch the block cutoff type to 1 day at a time. And what room key then does is on January 19th, at the end of the day, it would only release the rooms for the 19th. On January 20th, it would only release the rooms for the 20th. Okay, and we did put that in the documentation again, just to explain that a little bit more. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. So again, it was something that never worked. Technically, it was a bug, but because it always worked that way, I think people got used to it. So we wanted to make sure that we put that in, that people would know that this change is coming, and we had to work around. Oh, and I do see a question here. The time is actually going to be at 11:59:59 at the end of that day that it would release. And you can certainly manually release those rooms anytime, or I even suggest for hotels, if you're not using cutoff in room key, it's always good maybe to at least do 1 day. Then the night before, if any cancellations happen, room moves, or something got missed in the block, at least 1 day would clean up the block before the day of arrival. Okay, so I'm going to close out of the group area, and you guys are going to go back to the meeting screen just for a moment. And I'm going to go to sharing just room key. So it'll be easier to see. Okay, so you should all be seeing just the room key hotel on here. So next we're going to talk about 2 brand new reports we put into the system. In the last release, we put in the ability to override restricted rates. So the first one could be that you want to display restricted rates. So here my AAA rate, my Facebook rate, and my government rate. These are all restricted rate plans. So there would be a permission for, or once you turn it on for the property, everyone can see these, but then we added a secondary permission that would allow the agent to override this restriction. So once this enable restriction overriding is used and we select the rate, at that point that's when we're going to capture that information for the report that rate restriction override was used. So to find these, if I go into reports, reservations, here we have the rate restrictions overrides. Now the first one is by booking date, and the second one is by arrival date. In general, the way we would look at it is by booking date, we're using this as an audit, and we're auditing the agents of that day and the team of that day. So I'm going to run this for January 27th. Okay, and here what I can see is the date and time. I can see the reservation that it happened to, room type and rate name that was overridden, arrival date, departure date of the booking, and the number of nights. Here we have the 4 restrictions that could possibly be overridden. CTA being closed to arrival, closing being a closed rate. Now, CTA, closed to arrival, would be on the first night of the stay. Closing would mean that a rate was closed on at least one of the days, or could be 2 of the days, during that stay. So we've overridden a closed rate during that stay. Length of stay, so that would be your minimum length of stay and maximum length of stay. Again, the length of stay works on the arrival date. So we overrode the length of stay based on the arrival date. And NTS being number to sell, and that is on any day of the stay that we overrode the number to sell. So what we put is we put yeses when it was used and nos when it wasn't. So you may even have this example here where I have Alexander McPhail, where both closed to arrival and length of stay was overridden. We then give totals down at the bottom of how many each was used, and we give the clerk. So at this point, as an audit on my clerk for that day, I may go back to Brandon and say, you know, we're using the length of stay restriction, we're overriding that quite a bit, right? We're putting these restrictions in place for a reason. In general, we want our agents to stand by those decisions that we made, but if they're not, we want to understand why are they overriding it, why are they having to use it, okay? Next one is the reports, reservations, rate restrictions, override, and this one is by arrival date. And I'm going to run this for March 1st, March 31st. So these dates are the stay dates of the reservation. So here what we're trying to look at is what is the effect that those overrides had during those days. So again, here we have the month of March. Now you can run this report, I can run this for March, April, and June, and what will happen is March will show up in one grid, then April, and then May. So they each get their own grid. We have the date here, the days of the week, and then the 4 restrictions that we're overriding, and the days that happened. So here I can see on Thursday, we actually had 2 closed to arrival overrides that were used on that day. Okay, we're getting the totals by day and then the grand totals at the end. So again, how we use this, we start to look at when these rate restrictions were override. And a good example may be this day on March 3rd. We can see that 6 overrides were used. But let's say we also look at that day and we can see that the hotel is actually sold out for that day, right? So we may look at the fact that we overrode and did a rate restriction on a, or we used the restriction override on a high demand day. So we would question, do we have to use those overrides? Can we wait for someone else to book? And we compare this with the override, or sorry, the abandonment report as well. So if we look at the fact if we turned away 10 other reservations on the date of March 3rd because we were sold out, we would then question, should we have taken those 6 other reservations by overriding the restriction? And some other analytical things you can do with those, of course, but really we're looking at the effect that those restriction overriding has. Okay, so those 2 reports are under reports, reservations, rate restriction override by booking date, and by arrival date. Next report we're going to look at is under reservations again, and it is abandonment reasons. Now, the abandonment reasons report, we had in current room key, we only have 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. You're going to go back to the meeting screen. I'm going to bring up the other hotel again so I can show you a comparison. Okay, so in Shane QA testing, this is the current version of RoomKey. We have reports, reservations, abandonment reasons report. I'm going to run this for January 27th. And here is the report that we get. I'm going to try to get these side by side. Okay, and then in the new version that's coming out tomorrow, I go into reservations, abandonment reasons. Now, you'll notice here we only have by booking date, and that's actually what this report is right now, by booking date. We are working on another report. We're about halfway through this new report, and it is going to be abandonment reasons by arrival date. So the same idea of the rate restriction override is the booking date, we're looking to audit what was done that day by our agents, and the arrival date is we're looking to see the effect that it has on the dates that the reservation were for. So same thing for abandonment reasons. So stay tuned in the next release. We are going to have by arrival date finished. So here we go to abandonment reasons by booking date. And again, I'm going to run this for January 27th. And again, I'll try to get these side by side. Okay, so what we've done is we've added more information to make this report more useful. We've put the date and time that the denial or regret was done. Here we put the reason. We've added the room type that the denial and regret was done on. We've also added the rate name. Arrival date, departure date was there, and lost nights was there. And you'll notice the amounts here are all on this report, whereas on the current report, notice that only one of the rooms actually has an amount. So what we've done is we've made an improvement to the way that we capture the rate. I'll go through that in just a moment. And then I just want to note down the bottom, we also have the summary of the totals down below. It will push to the second page depending on how many you have for that day. So here this is giving you the detail, and down below the summary, including lost nights, revenue, and ADR, average daily rate. So let me go back to the capture I was talking about. In current RoomKey, if you click on New Reservation, the only way we can get the amount to show on the report is if the agent were to make it through to booking the rate and actually booking the room, which doesn't always work, especially let's say that these dates were already sold out and the agent making this booking didn't have permission to click on enable overbooking to be able to book the room. Thus, we're losing that rate capture for that room. So what we've done in the new RoomKey coming out tomorrow is when I click on New Reservation, wherever the little black arrow is beside, so let's say for the sake of argument, I had the black arrow on the AAA rate and the black arrow beside the KNF, that's what we're going to report on the report. And it will capture the night. So you don't have to make it through to selecting the rate even. As long as the little black arrow, whatever it's beside, is what we're going to capture on. And again, for the room type. Okay, so something to note as well, if you go to New Reservation, you're talking to the person, and let's say you do nothing at all and you click cancel, RoomKey is going to report on the 2 QNL for that day, so your first room type, and even if you don't expand on this rate, it's still going to capture whatever your top rate is. Okay? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing just for a moment here. And we're going to go back to just the main RoomKey screen. Okay, next we're going to move on to the statistics reports. So if you go into report, statistics, and there is wholesale statistics and corporate statistics, and it is the reports that are by date range. And what you'll notice that we've added is this hide blanks check mark. Now by default, the hide blanks check mark will be on, and I'm going to run this for February 1st. February 1st, 2015 to February 28th, 2015. So if I run the report as is, it's going to do it like it does now. What the change does is if I unclick the hide blanks, it's going to show me any accounts that are zero producing accounts. So especially if you were to use the sales manager functionality attached to the reports, you can start to see for Bryn, all three of his accounts are not producing. So we start to look at, is it a function of the sales manager, or is it a function of that account that we're not getting the business? It just helps us give a clearer picture to analyze what's going on with our accounts and see the ones that are not producing. Now, of course, you could run the report before and compare that to the all the accounts that you have in the sales under operations corporate, but this helps with seeing the zeros on there. So again, the hide blanks is going to show zero producing accounts. Okay, next, this one affects any of our properties that are using either Shift4, Heartland, or Sage Payment, so the credit card interface. It'll also only work for those hotels that take authorization on check-in. So if I go to System Configuration, Property, and if I go to the Preferences tab, this here, the Disable Authorization at check-in, so some hotels take payment as soon as the guest checks in. If you have this turned on, the function I'm about to show you will not work. And again, if you don't have the interface to a credit card, it's not going to work either. It won't apply to your hotel. So essentially what we have here is Hal Johnson checked in today. He's staying for one night, so the room and tax comes to $115. Here we can see the balance is $115 and the credit limit is $115. Now if I go to transactions, authorized transactions, I do apologize. My connection to our server in Vancouver did not work today, so you're not going to see the authorized transaction here. But what you would see is you would see the authorized amount being the $115, the authorization number from your credit card processor. Now, let's say we were to change the reservation. So I'm going to change the stay. And as you remember, we already have the $115 authorization on the credit card. If I unbook and we add a night, so here we're adding another $100, so that would add on $115 with tax, and click OK, we would want the agent to authorize for another $115. So currently in RoomKey, and the current version is, you would have to go to Transactions, click on Guest Folio Credit Limit for this pop-up to come up. Now RoomKey already works out the amount for you, but what we've added for this feature is the Guest Folio Credit Limit will pop up automatically when you extend the stay. So this is a friendly reminder to the front desk agent, hey, you should be authorizing more on the credit card. Now, a couple of caveats to this. If the guest is a cash paying guest, we're not going to pop up this window. If the room and tax is on Folio 8, so it's being direct billed, we're not going to pop up this guest folio credit limit. So it's really for those that we have the authorization on, that we're extending the stay, increasing the number of nights that this would pop up. So in this case, all we would have to do is click post, and what room key will do is it will authorize for the additional amount on the credit card of 115. So we're doing an incremental increase to the authorization on hand. Okay, next we are going to talk about the reservations from a group, a corporate, or a wholesale. So if I go to make a reservation, I'm going to choose my client type corporate, and we're going to choose our account Citrix. We do our normal thing here. I don't have any rates attached, so we highly recommend not using manual rate, because again, manual rate loses meaning on reports, but my fake hotel does not have it. Okay, so if I go here and we go to guest info, you're going to notice a new checkbox here, which is use address from corporate account. And if you use a wholesale company, it'll say use address from wholesale, and for group, it will use address from group. So this is just a quick way to fill in the address. If they're with that company and they just say, I just want to use my company address, it's going to pull that information in either from the corporate, wholesale, or group area for you. Okay, now it's not going to pull in telephone and email, because that would be unique to the client. Okay, and as well, if you did want to change it, so say that they own the building, but he's in suite 200, this only changes the address for this reservation. It's not going to change it for the Citrix. It's just a quick way to pull the address in, just so we can make it through the address, make it through the booking a little bit quicker. Something I do want to bring up about this check mark, this was actually a suggestion made on our AHA portal, our suggestion portal, and at the time of planning for this release, it was one of the top voted items. So just want to let everyone know out there, we are looking at that AHA portal. We are looking, the votes are going in. It's great to see that there's conversations being made. I've seen other hotels making suggestions to other hotels about how they might be able to handle something or do a workaround for something, or a best practice that's out there as well. So I do want everyone to know we are looking at that AHA portal. In this release coming up, the next one, I have 2 or 3 items going in from the AHA portal. So your voice is being heard. Please get on there. If you don't know about the AHA portal, you can access it from our support page. I am going to put a little reminder of where the link is in the release notes tomorrow as well. Okay, I'm not going to demo for the wholesale and group area, but you get the idea of how the address works there. Okay, and that is the main features there. I'm going to talk about a few little tweaks that we made, and there will be a few more tweaks in the notes coming out. So these are bug fixes that we may get in and finish through our ticket capture with our support department. So the first thing is under Operations, City Ledger. And if I go to Astra, something that we recently added in here was adding the GDS confirmation number. So if you have a booking over in room key that has a GDS confirmation and you check it out to City Ledger, we're going to carry that GDS confirmation over to the City Ledger. Now typically the GDS confirmation number is tied to a person or a reservation. So if you did happen to take, say I took Helen, Will, and Bill and put them all on one invoice by using the transfer function, we're still only going to show whoever the first GDS confirmation number was. We really put this in for hotels that kind of have a one person to one invoice for GDS confirmation, because sometimes the OTAs like to get the confirmation with their GDS booking number on here. So for this release, we went a step further. If I were to go to pay invoice, would you like to post this payment to multiple invoices? I'll say yes. We'll do 500, let's say, and when we get to next here, we've added the GDS confirmation number to the payment screen as well for the invoices. So if a OTA were to send you a check for GDS confirmation, you know, this one, this one, this one, then you would know which ones you're going to pay off. And you can use the sort on this as well, just like the other fields, if you want to resort. Okay, and the last one I'm going to talk about today is the, for EMV, which is the chip and pin, in Canada, we put in a new way of dealing with debit cards from Canada. And in Canada, we have the Interact debit cards. And in the US, there is the credit cards that can be handled as a debit transaction or a credit transaction. So what happens is when the guest puts the debit card in and it processes as a debit transaction upon check-in, it doesn't actually authorize the card at that time. It actually charges the card at that time. So the change we've made is when the guest is coming to check in, and I will say for the US right now, the EMV and the chip and pin, it's still in the process of being rolled out in the US, and the payment processors are kind of catching up, and all the banks are catching up to where they should be. So you'll see a lot more changes coming with EMV in the coming year for sure. But anyways, with the debit card, what happens is, the way we've made it is, if the person puts in the credit card, Roomkey recognizes it's a credit card and will do it as an authorization on the card, and we would settle on checkout. If the guest chooses to do it as a debit transaction on the Genico unit that they're putting their chip and pin into, Roomkey will recognize that that is a debit, and it will actually post the payment right on the Folio and print out the receipt. So we just made it easier for the front desk agent. They don't really have to know if it's a debit or credit card at the time that the guest puts the card in. Roomkey will recognize based on the type of transaction that was. Okay, and that is actually it for today's presentation. Again, there will be some more tweaks and defects coming out with the release notes tomorrow. I am going to cut over to the question area and see if I can see any questions in there. For anyone that doesn't have any questions, if you feel, you can feel free to dismiss yourself if you have everything that you needed from here. Okay, so one of the questions was, what time do the rooms release? And that was during the cutoff, and I talked about that happens at 11:59:59 in the day of. So essentially, if you want it to happen in the morning, if you did it for one day before as a cutoff, it would do at 11:59:59 the day before. What if you change the rate type during the reservation process? Which one does the report take? If you change. Okay, I think you're talking about during the time of the abandonment. So here, if I click on new reservation, perfect. And so here, if we're on the best available, it's going to do the best available. And if I select another rate, it's whatever rate would be selected. Oh, I think I know what you mean. I think you mean say I had the best available rate checked by my black arrow on a different rate. Is that what you're asking, Ben? Yeah, I think that's what you meant by your question there. So I'm gonna, if whatever one is checked, it's definitely going to use that one. Yes, if the guest look at more than one rate. Oh, okay. So if you were saying, you know, they were switching around and looking at this rate and that rate, whatever rate you're on at the time of clicking the cancel, that's the one it's going to report on. But now I am curious myself, if you have the check, and I don't think I tested this, if you have the checkbox on the best available, but your arrow is beside the friends and family, I'm thinking it's going to do best available. I honestly did not test this. I will be completely transparent on that, and it does. Yeah, best available. So if you select a rate, that's going to override the little black arrow because it's actually a selected rate. Okay, I'm going to, perfect, thank you. Okay, so I don't see any more questions there. And again, I can't see if someone is typing a question, so I'm going to hang out for a little bit more just in case someone is typing a good question out there. But otherwise, if you don't have any other questions, thanks everyone for attending. I do appreciate your time. I know you're all busy. And I look forward to getting this release out to tomorrow and working on the new stuff. I'm going to stop